Hello, hello, good evening. It's Monica from Life is Art, and it's Wednesday. Let's create. I'm just trying to get my video to go on the side here. And I hope you're having a wonderful day and a lovely week. There we go. Okay, I gotta adjust my camera. Wow, crazy view we got going on here. Okay, let's see if we can do this. I have my camera literally like 8 inches above my table right now. I've got all my things set out here, and I don't know why it's so different. Usually I use a different camera. Ooh. Well, I guess we're gonna move the mat to meet the camera here. So hopefully I don't bump the camera. Hopefully it doesn't go really wonkadoodle with the focus because it's so close. This is really odd for what we're doing, but we are here and we are creating. I'm actually going to move it slightly this way because don't really need all of that foamy stuff, but I need a little bit of foamy stuff. Okay, if you're joining me live, just say hello or howdy so I know you're here. And if you're watching later on replay, you can say replay. I'm sorry about like this weird like bend in the earth thing that's happening right now. My husband borrowed my other video machiney thing, and I didn't remember that I needed to go and get it from him, and he's a little bit incapacitated at the moment. He's done something bad to his back, so I don't want I wasn't expecting him to hike up and down the stairs to bring it to me, and so it's still upstairs, I think. So yeah, we are going to be making where did I put it? A triple panel pillar pop card. Now try to say that 5 times fast. That is a super duper tongue twister. A triple panel pillar pop card. And it's really fun. So that's why we're going to be making it. We're going to be using the Wildly Flowering collection. I have to open my catalog before I put it under the camera because the camera is so close to my mat right now that it would literally hit the camera on the page. That's how close we are, and yet it looks so far away. Weird, weird, weird. So we're going to be using Wildly Flowering. It has a beautiful color combination of Wild Wheat, Mossy Meadow, Misty Moonlight, Moody Mauve, Early Espresso, and Crumb Cake. And then we're also going to be using a stamp and die set. I'm going to turn very carefully so as not to hit my camera. From the Country Woods collection. What am I picking up? I'm trying to pick up my book and I'm trying to take the label off my mat. We're going to be using the Country Birdhouse stamp and dies as part of this creative endeavor this evening. So we're kind of picking a stamp that is, sort of created to go with a different collection, and we're going to use it with a different one. So that is the fun thing about your crafty things, is that you can mix and match to your heart's content. Now, if you're joining me live, just pop a message in the chat because I don't see anything happening, and I want to make sure that something is happening in the chat so I know if it's working or not. If it's not working, then I guess I won't see your comments. And if it is working, yay! And if you have any questions, feel free to add them in there. So to start our project today, we're going to start out with a standard size cardstock base, and I'm going to use white for this. And this is a 8.5 by 5.5 piece of white paper, and because we are so close, we're going to get that weird white glowing glare. Awesome. And so we've scored it at 4 1/4. We're going to fold it with the bump side of the score line to the inside and crease that down just like that. And that is our card base, and we're going to use it as a regular vertical standard card base. Isn't it nice when you can start with a standard card base to make a fancy fold or a fun fold card? So that's our starting point, but we need to come in with a second piece of cardstock to create the pillar part of our triple panel pillar pop card. And for our pillar part, we are going to be using Misty Moonlight, and this piece is 3 inches by 5.5 of the Misty Moonlight, and we're going to do some scoring. So let me just grab my scoreboard here and park this under here. We're going to be scoring it along this short side, along the 3-inch side. Kind of move it closer so we're right in the middle. Grab my scoring tool here out of the little holder at the bottom. So we've got our 3 inches along here, and we're going to score it at 3/4 of an inch. So just carefully scoring. I'm gonna go for the big one because it's jumping around on me. 3/4 of an inch. Look at that. I'm slowly getting used to how to use this scoreboard. Sometimes it's not as successful as I would like. Then we're going to score it at 1.5 inch. So 1.5 inch, I'm going to do that twice. And then we're going to score it at 2.25. So what we end up is 4 panels that are all 3/4 of an inch. So along our 3-inch side, we scored at 3/4 of an inch, 1.5, and 2.25. Hey, Mom, nice to see you're watching. Thanks for putting a comment in the chat. I'm going to move my scoreboard out of the way, but I'm going to keep my stylus or my scoring tool handy because we're going to use that for a little technique in here in a few minutes. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mountain fold all of these 3 score lines. So that means we're going to fold it with the bump side to the back side, or the bump side to the inside. We're going to do it for all 3 of these score lines and crease it down. And when we make a pillar card, what we want to create to give us that pillar is a long square tube that creates our pillar. That doesn't have to be square. I suppose it could be a rectangle, but we've got a long square tube. Now, quite often we create it so that there is a little extra flap that comes over and we attach it together. But this one, we're going to use the card base as the closure. So all we need to do now is we're going to just have it folded in half on that second middle score line so that we have our opening over here. And we're going to put some adhesive on the last section before the end, or if we opened it up. We're going to put adhesive in the first section and in the last section. So folded, and we're going to put some adhesive. Let me grab my... And I could use liquid glue for this if I was patient, but I'm not. You know this. So we're going to go ahead and use this. There we go. Adhesive. So that's in our first section. Now we're going to come over here to the last section, or the 4th section, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to add some adhesive. This is a 1/4 inch adhesive that I'm using here, and it's a 1/2 inch or 3/4 of inch. What did I say? This is a 1/4 inch adhesive, and this is a 3/4 inch space. Now, this one I actually ran over the edge. You see that? My adhesive went over the edge. So all you do when that happens, so that it doesn't cause a problem in the future, is you just take your finger and you go along the edge and just fold it over to the inside here where you want the adhesive. Okay? We're going to remove the adhesive from both sections that have adhesive on them. We're going to remove the backings. Okay? Now remember how we did it before. We had it folded in half on that second score line. So now we've got sticky stuff on this side and sticky stuff on this side, and this is our opening. We're going to open up our card, and we're going to line this sticky panel up so that it is centered top to bottom. and lines up with the top and bottom and is tucked right into that corner where this card is going to close. And then when we're happy with where it is, we're just going to go ahead and close our card. That's how easy it is to get that pillar in there. Just close the card. And because we put adhesive on both those sides of the little pillar, it is now stuck in the center of our card. How simple is that? I think we can all accomplish that. So there is our little pillar in the middle of our card. Now, it's not going to open exactly flat because when we put that in, there's a little gap. You can see there's a little gap to allow for the easy opening and closing of the card. So it won't lay entirely flat. So while we're decorating, we're going to have one side or the other kind of standing up. But that's okay because for presentation, we want it to stand up nicely like this. So it closes perfectly fine and it opens up enough. We don't need it to open all the way. So in these two large panels on either side of our pillar, we're going to add in some designer series paper, and this is from that Wildly Flowering collection, and it is a gorgeous textural sort of floral in the Misty Moonlight, and the back side is also basically the same background, a little bit lighter, but it has these gorgeous large florals on it, and those are going to sort of come into play later, or similar ones. But for the inside of our card, we want something a little bit simpler as the base background designer series paper. So we're going with this pattern, and these two pieces have been cut to 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. And you need 2 of them. So I'm going to go ahead and add my adhesive. Might as well do both of them while we're at it. Add my adhesive to this DSP. If you hear me say DSP, for those of you who are not familiar with Stampin' Up, DSP stands for Designer Series Paper, and pattern paper, which is what we called it in the past. So there we go. We've got some of that. Now, if you look at this pattern, you can see that there is a direction to it because these florals have some stems, and all the stems are going vertically. So you want to kind of make sure your flower's on top and your stem's coming down if you want it to make sense. And what we're going to do is we're just going to center it in the middle of this white cardstock panel on the inside cover of our card. Then we're going to come over to the back inside panel, and we're going to add the second piece. Again, this is 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. And you know me, I love the blues. I'm kind of addicted to blues, favorite color. And so we've got our stems going the right direction. So I'm loving all the, Misty Moonlight and Night of Navy and boho blue and the blueberry bushels, all those fun colors. So there we go. We've got our Misty Moonlight DSP as well as our Misty Moonlight cardstock in the center. And already it's looking fabulous because blue. Why not, right? Let's scooch this over because now we need to come in with a little bit more cardstock. So we're going to need 3 pieces. I've just knocked my card on the floor here. We're going to need 3 pieces of white cardstock, and these pieces have been cut to 3 inches by 1 3/4, because remember, this is a triple panel pillar pop card. So these are our triple panels. And then I want to add on different designer series paper on here from the Wildly Flowering collection, but bringing in a different color. So these ones have that beautiful Moody Mauve background on there. They have a smaller scale floral, which is nice. You want to mix sort of a mid floral with a smaller scale floral, and that gives a nice little bit of contrast. I also like having that little bit of white cardstock showing around the edge because that gives a nice little break and makes them stand out. But these pieces of the Moody Mauve floral have been cut to 2 3/4 by 1.5 inches. And I'm just going to go ahead and adhere them centered on this cardstock. And you will notice that this pattern paper is also directional. So let me see. You will see it more clearly on this one. It actually goes this way because the stem is going this way for this flower and this way for these flowers. So, but because there's such a small scale and because you're not going to see oodles of it, I am okay with having it going horizontal. Call me crazy, but I think it's all right. And so we're going to go ahead and do that. And we won't worry about the consequences. We're being creative. Sometimes there's rules and sometimes there's not. This one, because it's such a large panel, it makes more sense to have them following the direction. And this one we can just go willy-nilly. All right, so we're attaching our 3 designer series paper pieces to our cardstock. And there we go. Now, each of these panels is going to be attached to our center pillar of our card. And we're going to put the first 2, let me scooch. We're going to put the top and the bottom ones on this side of the pillar. And we want to line them up with the top of the card. So this top edge of this panel is going to line up with the top of this pillar. And consequently, when it closes, let me just see if I can get you a view of this. When it closes, it will line up with the top of the card. Okay, but we want it all contained. We don't want it sticking up. And so this is a 3/4 inch panel. So on this side of our piece, we're going to need to add some adhesive that doesn't go farther than 3/4 of an inch in. Does that make sense? We only want to put adhesive where we're going to need it. Okay, so that one's going to be at the top there when we stick it down. This one's going to go at the bottom. So over here, we need to, and I'm using my mat to help me with this, we need to put adhesive no more than 3/4 of an inch. In fact, I'm going shy of the 3/4 of an inch because, again, we want to, just like we did when we added in our pillar, we left a little gap. We want to leave, let's start with the top one. We want to leave a little bit of gap so that our card does not have any issues with the mechanical bits of opening and closing. So we're going to add this piece right here at the top, but we want to kind of close the card. I haven't squished it down yet. We want to kind of close the card and make sure it lines up at the top and stays straight all across that back panel of the card. Can you see that? And then we will squish it down and stick it. And so you can see here that there will be a tiny, tiny, very tiny little gap. And that means that when we want to close our card, it won't get all bunched up amongst itself. It won't get a knot in its knickers. And it will close much nicer. So when you're adding something to part of a mechanism that needs to close, it's always a good idea to start that closing process in the midst of sticking in the item. Does that make sense? Hey, Heather, nice to see you're watching. So let's do that again with this lower one. We're going to kind of put our thumb here, my dirty thumb. I got into some ink. And we're going to line it up, and then we're going to start to close it and make sure that we're maintaining that nice straight line along the back panel and stick it down. So we've got 2 of our panels going that way. Now we want to switch directions, and we're going to stick this panel in between going the opposite direction. So it's going to be on this flat surface of the panel. Okay, so that means that this side of our cardstock needs to get some adhesive, no more than 3/4 of an inch from the end. I always like to say it out loud because that helps me remind myself what I'm doing. And it also tells you what I'm doing. It's a win-win, that. All right. So now what we want to do, there is going to be, let me lift this up so you can see. See how there's a little bit of a gap in between all of these panels? That's because 5.5 inches is really difficult to divide 3 ways. So to save myself some heartache and too much math and too much technical cutting, I made my pieces so that there will be a little gap, and that actually helps the card to open and close. If by chance you made something a little bit askew, it'll still open and close and it won't get stuck on itself. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to line it up in that corner down here. We're going to try and make sure it stays horizontal in a straight line. And we also want to make sure that we can close our card. So I'm going to do it gently, and then I'm going to open it back up and make sure it looks straight. Okay, before I stuck it really good, because you can always have a chance to try and lift it if it got wonky. But it looks good. So now I'm going to stick it down and give it a squish. And now you can see the fun sort of juxtaposed panels that are created when you put them on opposites or adjoining sides of that pillar in the corner of your card. So we've got our triple panels popping out from our pillar. See how we got the name? And now we need to do some decorating. So to do some decorating on this, I'm going to give a little extra squish there so it stays open. I decided that because we have such gorgeous pattern paper in this collection, let me just grab some of it here. I was going to fussy cut, because you know how much I love to fussy cut. So you can see here, obviously I fussy cut some flowers out of this. And I also fussy cut some flowers out of this pattern paper. And so those were basically the 2 main patterns that I used for fussy cutting. And you can see here now, let me just move that one out of the way, that we have a medium pattern, a small scale pattern, and then a large scale pattern with these large flowers. And that gives us a nice mix of patterns for our card. If we did all small, it would be overwhelming. If we did all medium, it would probably be boring. If we did all large, it would be overwhelming as well. But because you mix it up, and because this one is very tone on tone, this one is a contrast color, and some of this is going to get hidden, it's just kind of a pattern hanging out in the background. Now we can add some large scale fussy cut goodness in here, and it's not going to be overwhelming. So the first piece I fussy cut was some of that one pattern that has pretty much all the same type of flowers on it. And I love that it also has a blue background on that paper. You can see it probably if I put it on my hand. So the outline, when you leave the halo, is that blue. Well, that's the same blue that matches the background. And so if you feel a little unsure about your fussy cutting abilities, then try to match a background with a background of what you're fussy cutting, and then it'll kind of all blend together. Nobody will see any little mishaps that you might feel that you've had while doing your fussy cutting. And that is awesome too. You can kind of hide it, doing a little bit of fudging, as it were. Okay, so let's stick a pretty little flower up here for some extra embellishing. I also cut out one of the tiny flowers that's on that same piece of paper. So let's add this, and I could be sticking these down with liquid glue, but I don't need to. And I think it kind of gives it a little extra texture if I just add a little bit of adhesive in the center and stick it down, because the edges lift and that gives a bit of a shadow. Now, again, if you were unsure about your fussy cutting, you might want to stick it down really well. You can even do that tap, tap, tap method where we put the liquid glue on our hand, tap, 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 and make sure that it's all really well sealed right to the edges. You don't have to, just giving that as an option. And then let's flip over to this side. I'm going to scooch it this way so that you don't get distracted by the vertical bit. And we're going to add some decoration to these panels here. So again, I've cut out another piece from that same pattern paper. Going to add some adhesive on here. The back side of this is a really nice crumb cake color. Nice neutral. That's the other thing I found. Because we have this Misty Moonlight, it kind of acts as a neutral. And we can even have a little bit of this flower sticking out over the end. You see what I did there? Because I have a little bit of leeway when I close it. There's still about 1/2 of an inch. So I can have some of my flower sticking out over the end to create a little bit of a break from all the straight lines when you're creating something like this. Now down here on the bottom one, I'm going to add another one of those flowers. And you're probably saying to yourself, wow, we're using all the same flower. How creative is that? Don't worry, we're going to add in something different here in a second. I will mix it up, I promise. We're going to have all sorts of things going on here. And again, this one can have a little bit sticking over the end like that. And I think it's nice that there's little bits in the background here because it kind of makes it look like a bigger cluster. You're just adding another layer onto the cluster. So again, this one, when it closes, it won't come out the confines of the edge of the card. So you want to keep that in mind. Don't get too crazy. And we're also going to add some here, just like we added to our DSP over here. We're going to add some here, but this time we're gonna jazz it up a bit. So we've got this large flower cut. We've got a little bit of leafiness happening here. We've got a little bit of some pink floral we're going to kind of tuck under there. And the reason I'm tucking that one is because this was actually touching over here somewhere. See how there's a little tip of pink there? So we had to chop that off. Because we chopped it off, we can tuck it under and nobody's the wiser, except for I just told you all about it. And then we've got one more piece that I want to add, but I haven't fussy cut it yet because it wouldn't be right for me to not show you some kind of fussy cutting on this card where we're doing so much. And so you just take your DSP, you cut out rough cut. And because I'm going to probably do lots of fussy cutting with this DSP, I carefully rough cut out the pieces that I needed so as not to disturb other things that I might want to fussy cut later. And then you're going to leave that halo of the background color all the way around. Now these particular florals have that crumb cake background as opposed to the Misty Moonlight. So they don't blend in as much with the background as the other one did, but they still look so pretty with it. And you're going to just pivot your paper all the way around till you get to the end. And that's that. Easy peasy. So we're going to layer these up. So now that I've kind of got this going, I'm going to use a little bit of liquid glue on this particular piece because it's long and skinny. Add a little liquid glue there. Stick it on. We could even add liquid glue on this one, just because. Stick that on. Then we've got this larger piece. Add this on. So we're making a nice little cluster. The opposite side, we had our background flowers up at the top. This one is kind of in the middle and it's taken up more space. So not only have we changed up the florals between different sections, we've also changed the size of the clusters. So this was a smaller flower. This was a little bit bigger. This had 2 different flowers. This one has 3 flowers and a leaf cluster. And so it's nice to kind of mix it up It's not all the same, okay? Now on this panel, we're going to add in some fussy cut flowers, and this one was a nice cluster with a lot of leaves. So again, that makes it a little bit different. We're going to stick it on here, and I'm not going to add too much adhesive because this one's going to stick over the edge a bit, but I have to remember not to go more than 1/2 inch. So I'm going to kind of gauge myself a little bit. And we're going to kind of go off the top edge. We're going to make sure it still closes, which it does. Let's give it a squish. There we go. So that's even more so off the edge than these ones. Now you might be worried that when you close, that will interfere with the top and bottom, but it doesn't. It'll just close in there nicely, and it won't get tangled up. But we want to add a little bit of a sentiment on here because we're not actually going to add a sentiment to the front of our card. I know, how weird is that? So I've got a little piece of white cardstock. This has been cut to 2.5 by 3/8 of an inch. And we're going to stamp the sentiment from our Country Birdhouse stamp set that says, "Happy Birthday." I find I don't actually make a lot of birthday cards. I try to make a lot of generic cards. I make a lot of thank you cards, but I need a few birthday cards. And so I'm going to use the Misty Moonlight ink for this. I've got it loaded up on my block. Get it inked up. I'm going to stamp in the center of this little piece of cardstock. There we go. Our happy birthday. So that's our Misty Moonlight. And then what I want to do to just give this a little bit of something, we're going to take our scissors and we're just going to trim a little angle here. Just like that. And we're going to do the same angle on the other end, like that. So fancy, I tell you. Not even dovetail, just on an angle. And then we can add some adhesive. You may have noticed I'm not using any dimensionals inside this project. That's because there's a lot of things happening in here already. We don't need to add dimensionals. We don't want it to be puffy in weird places. So I'm going to actually turn this sideways so I can use my tweezers to help me add this on the panel over top of the flower. And then we can close it, stick it down. You could decorate these panels before you stick them in. I just think in my head, it helps me remember where the edge of the card is if I decorate them when they're already in there. So that's the inside of our card done. Now you might be thinking to yourself, that's great. Where are we writing the message? Well, don't forget that we have the entire back piece of the back panel of the card. Lots of room for writing a message. But when it's on display, we don't necessarily want our personal message showing to, whoever might look at the card. But we do need to decorate the front of the card because when it comes out of the envelope, that's the first thing you're going to see. So we want to make that nice and special. So for the front of the card, I've got a piece of the Moody Mauve cardstock, and this has been cut to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. Now don't worry, I am going to be writing down all of these measurements. I also have a piece of this beautiful paper that has the blue textured background and the really large florals. So those are very much the same florals as what we cut out here, but they're on an even bigger scale. Look how big that is compared to that one. So this is like an extra large size floral, which is going to look great on the front of our card. It might have been too big for the inside of our card, but it's the same kind of flower, but a different background. But because we have so much blue on the inside, and we're putting a little bit of blue on the front, I thought a tiny bit of the Moody Mauve would be good. So this floral is 4 by 5 1/4. It's actually the back side of the one we used inside. How cool is that? And we're going to go ahead and add a little extra adhesive on these two panels. We're going to stick these together so there will be a tiny little touch of that mauve showing all the way around. If you want to conserve paper, you could take a punch or a die and cut something out of the center of this. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm just going to stick my panel on the front. Now, there's only going to be a little bit of that mauve showing. So we want to make sure we line it up pretty good. And then we will go ahead and add this to the front panel of the card, or the front cover of the card, however we want to say it. And I'm going to add that little extra adhesive there in the center, just because this is a bulkier sort of card. Not terribly bulky, like it's not as bulky as some fancy folds, but you see how it kind of pops open. And if your card your card panel that you put on the front is not stuck down as well as it could be, you can get that sort of puckering happening. Just trying to decide if one way looks better than the other. I actually prefer it this way, even though it almost looks like it should go the other way. This kind of looks like trailing flowers as opposed to growing up from the ground flowers. All right, and we're going to have a little bit of our white card base showing all the way around. So we'll stick that down. How pretty is that? It picks up on the mauve, on those flowers, having that extra little bit of the cardstock showing all the way around. And now the next thing I want to do is I have gone ahead and stamped the Birdhouse from the stamp set. I used my stamping platform to do this just to help me get it on there and make sure I didn't need to do it more than once, which I didn't. I managed to get a good, nice image. But I'm going to do some coloring on this. And I have two Stampin' Blends colors here. I have the light Pecan Pie and the light Mossy Meadow that we're going to use for this. And so for the Pecan Pie, we're going to go ahead and color the inside of this sort of gingerbready bit. And of course, as we color, as we do, we're going to pivot our paper around and give you all seasickness. So I'll try and do it slowly. And then we're going to fill in the little gingerbready bits all the way down, like so. I'm using the brush tip on the Stampin' Blends. Let's go down this side as well. Pecan Pie is a really nice color, by the way. It makes me hungry when I say it, but you know, things that you do for the color you want. You put up with the thought of wanting pecan pie. And then I'm also going to color down here on the base of the birdhouse. I could do paper piecing for this, and I have done paper piecing in other projects, but I decided today that we would go ahead and use our markers and color it in. And, you know, you can already see that I've colored outside the lines because that's how we roll sometimes. we practice makes progress, right? Not perfection. And then I've got my light mossy meadow, and we're going to go ahead and color the roof here. I do find that you need to play with markers when you try new markers for the first time. And I have found that these particular markers, because they blend so nicely, they also spread a little bit. So you can see as I'm coloring, I'm not necessarily going right up to the line. And yet when you look at it after, you don't necessarily see too many gaps. And so that's something that you just kind of learn as you play with something. So that's probably what happened down here, besides me just going outside the lines. I probably got too close, and it just spread. And that's okay. That makes for nice blending when you want it to blend. Now what we're going to do, something that I don't often do, is we're going to use the dies to cut this out. Now traditionally I would just use my scissors, because, you know, by the time you get the die out and stick it down and get out the machine and do the thing, I'm probably already going to have it fussy cut. But I know a lot of you would much prefer a die. So sometimes I show this part of the process. Actually, I'm going to do something else before I do this. I'm getting ahead of myself. I got so excited about the die. I want to add a little bit of detail onto our birdhouse here. So I might as well do it before I die cut it. I'm going to be using pecan pie, just like I did for the marker here. And from the, I'm going to scooch over here because, you know, you stamp on the squishy bit. From the set, there's like a little stamp that makes a wood grain. Let me just grab the case so you can see it better. See right here, this little bit here, it makes like a wood grain panel. And so I'm going to go ahead and ink that up gently. And then add a little bit of wood grain right there. And we're doing tone on tone because we markered it up. We colored it up. And now I've, off camera, as I was moving over here, this is how I stamped the first time. Turn it around the other way, and I'm going to stamp on this side closer to the bottom. And then you can see what that tone on tone pecan pie ink on top of pecan pie marker allowed me to create a fun little design on there. And then, keeping along the same thought process here, we're going to use pecan pie again, and we're going to use this stamp from the same stamp set, the Country Birdhouse. And it's this. It's like this speckly, messy, unmessy little scatter stamp. And so we're going to do messy, unmessy. So for those of us who like to have some control when we do messy, unmessy, we're going to add a little bit of masking with some sticky notes. Super simple. Oops, I got 2 sticky notes there. I don't want to waste them. So we're going to line them up along the edge of our birdhouse. Okay. Then we're going to ink up our messy, unmessy little splatters. We're going to do a first stamp off there, and then we're going to stamp onto our birdhouse, second generation. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to ink it up. We're going to stamp it off. We're going to turn it around the other way. Oops, forgot to move. We'll repeat that process here. We're going to move this over here. We're going to ink it up. We're going to stamp it off. And then we're going to stamp on this side, just like that. And that is kind of creating a little bit of texture on our birdhouse. Now we're going to come up here and we're going to sort of cover up our roof a smidgen. Not all of it, just some of it, because you remember that's pecan pie up there, and we're using pecan pie ink. So it's not unheard of that we could stamp them. I'm going to stamp off, and then we're going to add a little bit there. Stamp off again, and we'll add just a smidgen more. So we're creating just a little bit of texture on our birdhouse. Kind of gives it a little bit of a weathered look. It kind of gives us a little bit of dirt look. You know, because when your birdhouse is out in the weather all the time, it's going to get a little dirty by times. You know, the little birdies are going to be climbing around and building their house in there. And so it gets a little dirty. We're going to line our die up now that we have done all the steps we wanted to do. And use a little washi. Just stick it in, keep it in place. Grab our machine. Build our sandwich. Run it through. You can tell I haven't had supper yet. We've talked about pecan pie, and now we're talking about sandwiches. And my house, my children decided to make themselves craft dinner that they were supposed to make on the weekend while I was away. They made that for their supper. So my house smells like craft dinner. Hubby and I are going to have something different because he can't eat craft dinner. There we go. So there's our little birdhouse. Now, oh, I should have grabbed while I was at it. I want to cut out the hole in my birdhouse too, just for fun. So there's a die for that. It's kind of like that advertisement. There's an app for that. Well, there's a die for that. Let me grab some washi. Reuse our washi. And we're going to stick our little die right in the center to give our birds a little place to come in and out. Grab the machine again. Stick it in. Run it through. Now, I must say, as much as I like fussy cutting, having a die that cuts an inside piece can be very helpful, because I would have to get out my precision blade or my X-Acto knife, as it were, to cut that out, but I just stuck a die on it. So I can see that there are instances where dies can be super helpful, more so than a pair of scissors. But I have actually cut things like this out with scissors, so, because I'm weird. So we've got our card base here, and we've got our birdhouse. But you can see that we have a problem now, because it looks like our birdhouse is see-through. And we don't really want a see-through birdhouse. We want a birdhouse that birds would like to build a nest in. So I have cut myself a little piece of early espresso that is 1.5 by 1 3/4 inches. And we're going to grab some dimensionals here, because I want to give my birdhouse some dimension. And because I only want a little bit, I'm going to actually go to the side here of the dimensionals. There's a little bit of foam on the edge that's not part of all these little hexagons. And that makes a nice little bit of edging when you're doing something that's a little bit narrower. So I've added some adhesive, some dimensionals there. And then I'm just going to go ahead and center that over the hole before I squish it down too hard. There we go. So we've added the dimensionals, which makes a nice little shadow inside there. And because it's dark, it makes it look like the dark inside of a birdhouse. Now, to attach this onto our card, we want to add dimensionals in other places, because otherwise it's going to look weird. But that's going to make it lift off the background. Now, I don't need to add any dimensionals here because that's already popped up. So we'll go around it like that. But that's going to give ourselves a little bit of space from that beautiful background paper and help our birdhouse stand out. There we go. Taking all the backings off. All the way around. There we go. Okay. And then I want to center this in the middle of my card now. Whether I actually get it in the middle of my card is another thing, but that's what we're aiming for. So let's say that's about the center. And so there we go. But now I want to go one step further. And this is where dies really take off. Okay, so as much as I sort of razz on the dies, there are instances where dies are awesome. And that is when you have dies for things that you don't have stamps for. And so there are some beautiful little florals and leaves in here that are just a nice petite little size, much, much smaller than these large ones, that we can add on here to decorate. And because they're die cut, we can also do a little extra fussing with them. And that's one of the reasons why I have my foam mat here upside down. And it's also why I saved my stylus from when we did our scoring. So on the stylus, you'll notice you have a small end and you have a large end. The large end helps us do some fun things. Because this is foam, it has some squish. I'm going to turn this die cut little flower upside down, and I'm actually going to scooch here so that we can kind of get this more in the center so you can see what we're about. You know, we've gone all wonky, but that's life. The first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take the ball and I'm going to go in little circles at the end of the petals. And this will actually make, see what my flower's doing? It's like walking around on the mat. It's so cute. And then I'm going to do that to all 5 of the petals on my flower. There's 4 and 5. And you can see what's happening. My whole petals are all curling up. Now if I flip this over and I take the same part of my stylus and run it around in the center of the flower, you can see now that I've created a nice little bit of dimension to this flower. It's got a nice little cup shape, and you can do the same thing with all of these flowers. You can just go around, around, 3, 4. It doesn't take much time at all. 5. I know some of you do this technique already, so this is old hat. Then in the center. Then let's take this one, flip it over to the back side. And this one we can actually travel up the petal. So we start at the bottom, and then we travel up the petal, and you'll really see the dimension grow on these ones because they just, they curl right up. Yeah, I think it's always fun how it curls around like that. Look how much dimension that created. Now we turn it over and we do the center, and isn't that gorgeous? See how much that pops up off the base. Now, if you're putting your card in the mail, I totally understand that a lot of this is going to get squished out of it, right? It's going to go through mechanical machines to sort the mail, and it gets compressed, and that's fine. But we had the fun of doing it, and even if it does get squished, it'll still, paper has memory, it'll still look a little bit different than if we left it flat. Now we also have some little leaves. So we've got all these fun little leaves. We can do the same thing. Flip it to the back side, and this one you're going to do like long ovally circles. Ovally circles. I guess they're ovally ovals. Down the petals, flip them over, and if you want, you can go just to the tip and do it the opposite direction. And that will give you some fun dimension to your little leaves. How cute is that? You probably can't see it. Let me put my hand there. So they have a nice little bit of a curve to them, and it's super cute. And you know, you went the extra mile, right? So again, this is the back side. We can even go back and forth a little bit, around, and they curl up, add a little bit at the tip if we want, and so on and so forth. I mean, you can go crazy and make a bajillion of these while you're watching a movie, and that's super fun. But then you got to do something with them. So let's go back to doing something with them. Let's scooch back over here to the center, and up, up, up. Up, up, up. There we go. Let's add some, and of course I did some ahead of time. And these flowers also look good, layered one on top of the other. You put the, you put the big one, and then the little one inside of it. And so we're going to do that. Let me grab my tweezers, because that can be helpful for this process. And also my glue. I'm going to start right here in the corner of my birdhouse. Put a little dab of glue, because I find it much easier to dab it there first. And then stick my flower into it. Push it down. And then I'm going to take my glue and make a little dot of glue on the inside of my flower. And then I'm going to take my littler flower, and I'm going to layer it up, and I'm going to twist it a bit so that they're staggered. Just like that. So our big flower and our little flower are layered up, and the petals are not all in the same spot. Hope you can see that. And then let's add a little bit more. Let's add one of these double leafy things. We'll add a tiny little bit of glue to the stem. Yes, you should always squish glue right on top of your finished project like this. Highly recommend it. And we're going to tuck this underneath. Look at that. Have our leaves come up on top. Oops. And we need to give it a little push so it stays in place and doesn't chase after us when we move our hand away. And then let's come in with one of these little white flowers. I'll stick a little dot there. One good thing about the tweezers, it kind of keeps your hand out of the glue, right? Not that I never get glue on myself. And then we can put one of these in the center, the smaller size one. And you can really do as much or as little of this flower business as you want. It's totally up to whatever your heart desires. Like that. Let's add another one of these. Let's tuck it right there. Make sure it doesn't go off the edge of the card because we want it to fit in the envelope. And then let's add another one of these white ones, and maybe I'll kind of tuck it under that Moody Mauve like that. Put it there. Actually, I want it under the mauve, but on top of the base. Let's see if we can accomplish that. There we go. Let's put the center in like that. Squish. That one shifted. Give it a little spin. Stick it down. Liquid glue. It always gives you room to squish around, right? Even when you don't necessarily want it to. You know what we're going to do? We're going to stick another leaf in there. I'm going to trim some of its stem off so I don't have to tuck it in as far. Give it a little squizzle there. We're going to get serious now. We gotta tuck it right in. Like that. Try and get it under there. There we go. And then let's add this guy down here. This is where you just start kind of playing with everything, right? I find the tweezers are helpful because it kind of keeps my hands out of the way and lets me see what I'm doing. When my fingers are all in there, I can't really see what I'm doing. Now, this is looking lovely, but let's add some up here so that we can get a bit of dimension going on. So let's add a little dot of glue there. We don't want to keep all the fun in one spot. Let's make another cluster. We won't make this one as big. Add a little dot in the center. Who likes layering up their flowers like this? Have you tried this technique where you make them kind of dimensional looking? I know you can buy flowers that have a lot of dimension. You know, you can buy a whole package of really dimensional fabric flowers and add them into your projects, but I think it's super fun when you can create your own too. And let's add a little leaf there. And another leaf here. You know what? I'm going to take a little bit of that stem off. Doesn't need to be so long. I like that there is a nice long stem in case you need it, but we don't need it as much. I'm going to kind of group those two together. A little overlap there. Lovely. And then let's add another little flower up here. Like so. And let's see. Let's add one more leaf for good measure. Overlapping the birdhouse. This is always that point in the video where I start mumbling to myself when I'm adding little embellishments here and there. I always seem to feel like I'm just mumbling to myself. So if you ever feel neglected while I'm doing that, I apologize. I just kind of get lost in my thoughts. Where are we going to put stuff? There we go. I want to swivel that one a little bit more. And that looks good. We can save those for another project. But like all good cards, this needs just a little bit of something. So we're going to add in some of this linen thread, pull it off the spool, run it down the length here with the outside of our scissors to take that crinkly bit out of it. Maybe give ourselves 8 inches to work with. we'll trim off the excess. And I'm going to make a little bow. Oh, I've got a dry spot in my throat. One second. Going to grab a sip. Sip of water. Yes, I did get a scoreboard. Deborah, how cool is that? So now we're going to make 2 loops with our linen thread. I'll move this over. Maybe that'll help see what's happening. 2 loops, just like our bunny ears when we're tying our shoes. And we're just going to tie ourselves a little knot with our 2 loops. Pull it through. And then because this is not attached to anything, we can kind of play, right? This is the part of the process when we play. So we can adjust our loops. We can pull the ends. We can do anything we want to make our bow the size and shape that we want. And I kind of like that. And I'm going to trim off my ends. Give them a little bit of length, but not all that length. And then we can come over here. We're going to use some liquid glue for this. I'm going to put a dot right along the join here between the top of the birdhouse and the bottom of the birdhouse. And I'm going to stick the knot of my bow right in that little dot of glue. Just like that, just for a little extra something. And then the last step here is I've got some of these. Let me see, I'll grab this one. A friend of mine, Samantha, gave me a whole bunch of lovely bling. And this is from Stampin' Up, but it's retired bling. And so this one has some clear and some sort of off-white, and then some of this lovely sort of goldy yellow. And so I'm going to use the goldy yellow, and I'm just going to add some bling in the center of my flowers because, you know, as you do, you need a little sparkle. I'm going to put the big one inside this big mauve one. And because we've used 5 flowers, you see what we did there. We have an odd number. We've got 5 blings, also an odd number, which our brain loves. We love those odd numbers. And there we have our completed card. This is our triple panel pillar pop-up card. So when we open up, we have that pillar in the back, that triple panel with all of our lovely embellishing with our fussy cut florals and our lovely little happy birthday message. I love the dimension it creates when it stands up and gives you sort of that floating panel feeling too. And then, of course, the backside for all of our lovely message that we're going to write to our friend. So there we go. That is the triple panel pillar pop card created with just a white card base and adding in some Moody Mauve and some Misty Moonlight cardstock, then the beautiful pattern papers, the DSP from the Wildly Flowering collection, lots of fussy cutting, then our stamped images and die cut images from the Country Birdhouse Stamp and Dies. I had to remind myself. Country Birdhouse Stamp and Dies. Lots of pecan pie and mossy meadow on there to decorate. We gave it some dimension with some of those dimensionals. And of course, those beautiful flowers we created and a little bit of linen thread to tie it all together and a little bling to sparkle it up. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing that card come together. And if you feel excited and inspired and create one just like it or similar, you can use the same design with lots of different patterns and embellishments, then be sure to take a photo of it and pop it in the comments where I post this on the group or on the Facebook page, and we would love to see and be inspired by your creativity. Have a wonderful evening, and we will see you again soon. Toodaloo! Bye!